In the heart of an ancient forest, where the trees stood tall and dense, their canopies intertwined to block out the moonlight, there lived a girl named Alara. She was known among the villagers as a child of the woods, always wandering into the depths of the forest, fascinated by its mysteries. But as she grew older, the tales whispered around the village fires began to change. They said that Alara had once stumbled upon a clearing so serene, it seemed untouched by time itself. In the center, there stood an old oak tree with gnarled branches that twisted into grotesque shapes. Its bark was etched with symbols of a forgotten language, symbols that seemed to pulse with an eerie glow under the moonlight. Alara was drawn to the tree, compelled by an unseen force. One fateful night, under the full moon's watchful eye, Alara ventured deeper into the forest than ever before. The trees whispered secrets, their leaves rustling with an otherworldly cadence. She followed a winding path, lined with mushrooms that glowed like pale stars in the darkness. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. As Alara walked, a sense of unease crept over her. The forest seemed to come alive around her, shadows twisting and shifting in the corners of her vision. She quickened her pace, but the path ahead seemed to stretch endlessly. The moon was her only companion, casting long, eerie shadows that danced on the forest floor. Suddenly, she stumbled upon a clearing she had never seen before. In the center stood the ancient oak tree, its branches reaching out like skeletal fingers against the night sky. Alara approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. The symbols on the tree's bark seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, and yet she could not tear her eyes away. A cold wind began to blow through the clearing, carrying with it a haunting melody that seemed to echo from the depths of the forest itself. Alara felt a presence watching her, unseen eyes boring into her very soul. She tried to turn away, to flee from the clearing and the tree that held her captive, but her feet were rooted to the ground. Suddenly, the air grew thick with an unnatural chill. Shadows coalesced around the oak tree, taking form and substance. Figures emerged from the darkness, their features twisted and contorted into grotesque masks of agony. Alara gasped in horror as she realized that these were the spirits of those who had dared to tread into the heart of the forest, now trapped for eternity in this cursed place. The spirits moaned and wailed, their voices blending into a cacophony of anguish. They reached out to Alara with skeletal hands, their touch icy cold and clammy. She tried to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the truth. She had wandered into a realm beyond the living, where the line between the mortal world and the spirit world blurred into nothingness. Desperate, Alara closed her eyes and whispered a plea for mercy. The wind howled in response, tearing through the clearing with a ferocity that shook the trees. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the haunting melody ceased. The spirits vanished back into the shadows, leaving Alara alone in the silence of the forest. She collapsed to her knees, trembling with fear and exhaustion. The oak tree loomed over her, its branches creaking softly in the breeze. Alara knew that she had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death, but she also knew that the forest would never let her go. Its secrets were woven into her very being now, a reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath its ancient boughs. From that night onward, Alara never ventured into the forest again. The villagers spoke of her as a changed woman, haunted by the horrors she had witnessed. Some say that on quiet nights, when the moon is full and the wind whispers through the trees, you can still hear her voice echoing in the darkness, a warning to all who dare to tread where she once walked. Years passed, but the memory of that harrowing night in the forest never faded from Alara's mind. She became a recluse in the village, avoiding the edge of the woods and shunning any mention of the mysterious clearing and the ancient oak tree. But despite her best efforts to move on, the forest continued to call to her, its presence a constant weight on her spirit. As time went on, strange occurrences began to trouble the villagers. Crops withered in fields closest to the forest's edge, livestock grew restless and refused to graze near its boundary, and whispers of eerie figures seen among the trees spread like wildfire through the community. Alara, though she kept to herself, couldn't ignore the growing unease that permeated the village. One particularly stormy night, when the wind howled through the village and rain lashed against window panes, a young child went missing. Panic gripped the villagers as they searched desperately through the darkness and the downpour. Alara, her heart heavy with guilt and fear, knew where the child had wandered off to. Ignoring the protests and warnings of the villagers, Alara ventured once more into the forest. She carried a lantern to light her way, its feeble glow casting long, shifting shadows on the damp forest floor. The trees loomed overhead like silent sentinels, their branches clawing at the sky as if reaching for the storm clouds above. The path she had taken so many years ago was overgrown and twisted, as if the forest itself had conspired to erase any trace of her previous journey. Yet, Alara pressed on, driven by a desperate determination to find the lost child before it was too late. The forest seemed darker than she remembered, the air thick with a palpable sense of foreboding. The storm raged on, thunder echoing through the trees like the growl of some unseen beast. Alara called out into the night, her voice barely audible over the fury of the elements. Then, just as she feared she was too late, she stumbled upon a faint trail of tiny footprints in the mud. They led deeper into the heart of the forest, where the shadows grew denser and the trees closed in around her like accusing specters. With each step, Alara's lantern flickered ominously, threatening to extinguish in the damp air. She hurried along the path, her heart racing with a mixture of dread and determination. The child's cries pierced the night, faint but unmistakable, guiding Alara through the labyrinthine maze of trees and undergrowth. Finally, she emerged into a small clearing bathed in an ethereal glow. There, beneath the outstretched branches of the ancient oak tree, stood the lost child, a young girl no older than 7, trembling with fear and cold. Her tear-streaked face lit up with relief as she saw Alara approach, her eyes wide with wonder at the sight of the lantern's feeble light. Alara knelt beside the child, wrapping her in a warm embrace. The storm seemed to relent, the wind sighing through the leaves with a mournful whisper. She whispered words of comfort to the girl, reassuring her that she was safe now, that the forest held no more danger for either of them. But as Alara looked up, she saw them. The spirits of the forest, watching from the shadows with eyes that glowed like embers in the darkness. They were different now, their forms less menacing, their presence tinged with a strange sort of sorrow. They stood in silent vigil, their faces haunted and hollow, as if trapped between worlds. With a heavy heart, Alara realized the truth that had eluded her for so long. The spirits were not malevolent beings seeking to harm the living. They were lost souls, trapped in a liminal state between life and death, yearning for release. They had shown themselves to her that first night not to harm her, but to warn her of the dangers that lurked within the forest's depths.